Welcome to the Human Meme Podcast. I'm your everlasting host, David Bowles, and today we'll investigate the how and the why big ideas have trouble succeeding in the urban core. The failed city, an autopsy of urban collapse, and the question of why we bury what fails. There is a street in Jersey City called Baldwin Avenue. If you drove down it today, you would see nothing unusual. Asphalt, cars, a fire hydrant, the usual negotiation between infrastructure and weather. But if you had been standing on that street in late September 2013, you would have seen something that has stayed with me for 13 years. A road crew was rolling fresh asphalt over granite cobblestones. The cobblestones were 150 years old. The asphalt would last about 20. I asked the man operating the road roller why they were burying them. He gave me a one-word answer. Tires, not cost, not engineering, not city planning, tires. Cobblestones are rough on tires. Asphalt is smooth. The logic was complete. I have been thinking about that exchange ever since. Not because the operator was wrong, he was not wrong. Asphalt is, in fact, better for tires. But the cobblestones beneath it were structurally intact, had been structurally intact for longer than anyone alive in that neighborhood had been breathing. And the asphalt that replaced them would crack and pothole within 2 decades. Something durable was being buried beneath something disposable for the convenience of the least permanent users of the road. That is how my new book begins. The Failed City, an Autopsy of Urban Collapse, is the result of that observation extended across 20 case studies, 5 taxonomies of urban failure, and a diagnostic framework for understanding why cities die. But the podcast today is not about the book's argument. You can read the argument. It is 53,000 words long and it has a table of contents. The podcast today is about the instinct the book is built on. The instinct to bury. The institutional preference for covering failure rather than studying it. Think about what the road crew was doing on Baldwin Avenue. They were not repairing a street. They were performing a concealment. The cobblestones under that asphalt were ballast stones, granite blocks that crossed the Atlantic Ocean in the holds of empty cargo ships 2 centuries ago, dumped on the docks of port cities, because the ships needed the weight for stability during the crossing and needed to shed it to make room for American exports on the return trip. Those stones were repurposed as paving. They became streets, and for a century and a half, they worked. Then someone decided they were the problem rather than the foundation, and they were buried. This is what cities do with their failures. They mark them or they bury them, and then they forget what is underneath. Consider Centralia, Pennsylvania. In 1962, a fire started in a coal seam beneath the town. It is still burning. 64 years later, the ground is hot to the touch. Steam rises from cracks in the earth, and the town's zip code has been revoked. The population went from over 1,000 to fewer than 10. The government relocated the residents. The post office closed. The state invoked eminent domain. And then, something happened that is more revealing than anything in the geological record. The state buried Graffiti Highway, the one stretch of abandoned road that had become a pilgrimage site for people who wanted to see what a burning town looks like. They covered it with dirt. They concealed the visible evidence of the failure. Or consider Laurent, South Dakota. In 2003, a man named Marvin Miller announced a plan to build a deaf-centered community on the South Dakota prairie, a town where American Sign Language would be the primary language, where the architecture, the civic design, the governance structure would all be organized around the visual and spatial needs of deaf residents. The idea captured national attention. More than 100 families submitted reservation forms. Television covered it. Newspapers covered it. The deaf community debated it with the kind of intensity that indicated the idea had touched something real. Then nobody moved. Not one family relocated. The company dissolved. Miller left the state. And the entire episode was filed away, not studied, not analyzed, not examined for what it could teach about the distance between communal enthusiasm and communal action. It was a failed experiment. And like all failed experiments, it was treated as though its failure meant it had nothing to teach. A colleague of mine years ago made an argument that has shaped everything I have written since. His field was research methodology, and his contention was that failed scholarship. Research that had been rigorously conducted but had ended by disproving its own thesis deserved to be published with the same velocity and seriousness as research that confirmed its hypothesis. The academic world, he argued, was structurally biased toward positive results. Journals published findings, careers advanced on discoveries. The experiments that did not find what they were looking for were filed away, archived, forgotten. He was not a person I admired. The reasons for that are his own business, but the argument he made that day was better than the person who made it. And that fact is itself a version of the thesis I'm advancing in this book. Useful knowledge does not confine itself to attractive sources. The most valuable data sometimes comes from the least appealing places. The failed city applies that principle to urban collapse. The book is organized around 5 ways that cities die. The first is catastrophic erasure. A single event kills the city. Vesuvius buries Pompeii. Chernobyl empties Pripyat in 36 hours. A coal fire hollows out the ground beneath Centralia. A hurricane obliterates Galveston, and Houston inherits its economic function. In each case, the triggering event is identifiable, datable, and complete. The second is economic exsanguination, the medical term for death by bleeding, applied to cities that lose the single industry that sustained them. Gary, Indiana, built by U.S. Steel in 1906, abandoned when the steel left. Cairo, Illinois, destroyed not by an external shock, but by the racial hatred of its own governing class, which burned the city's commercial district through a sustained campaign of firebombing and boycott. Flint, Michigan, poisoned by the governance structure that was appointed to save money and ended by contaminating the water supply. The third is the utopian misfire. Cities planned from first principles that either never materialized or survived in forms unrecognizable from the original vision. Laurent is one. Fordlandia, Henry Ford's attempt to build an American company town in the Amazon basin, is another. New Harmony, Indiana, where the intellectuals lectured while the fields went unplowed. Oroville, India, 60 years old and 6% populated. The fourth is slow municipal death. Cities that decline over decades through the accumulation of compounding failures, none individually fatal, all collectively lethal. St. Louis, locked inside fixed boundaries since 1876 by a separation agreement that it has never been able to reverse. Camden, New Jersey, stripped of democratic self-governance. Detroit, the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history. Baltimore declining despite the universities and hospitals that were supposed to save it. The fifth is the never-built city. Cities that were announced, planned, and in some cases partially constructed, but that never achieved the form or function described in the original vision. Masdar City in Abu Dhabi, which was announced in 2006 as the world's first zero-carbon city, and is now a functioning development that bears no resemblance to the original promise. California City, where a real estate developer named Nat Mendelsohn graded 204 square miles of Mojave Desert into residential lots and built the roads and then watched as nobody came. 5 Ways to Die, 20 case studies, 2 millennia, 3 continents, and the question the book keeps returning to is not why cities fail. Cities fail for specific, identifiable, often predictable reasons, and the book lays those reasons out. The question is why we refuse to study the failures with the same rigor we bring to the successes. Jane Jacobs wrote The Death and Life of Great American Cities in 1961. The title promises a study of death and life. The book delivers overwhelmingly on the life. It is a study of what makes neighborhoods function, what makes streets safe, what makes cities work. It is one of the great books of the 20th century. But it does not study death. It does not conduct the autopsy its title promises. The failed city is the autopsy. The book argues that every failed city generates data. Every abandoned plan produces evidence. Every collapsed community contains information about what went wrong, when it went wrong, and what the conditions were that made the failure possible. That data is as valuable as the data generated by the cities that succeeded. In some cases, it is more valuable because a negative result eliminates a possibility, and the elimination of possibilities is how knowledge advances. But we do not publish it. We do not study it. We file it away. We cover the cobblestones with asphalt and we move on. The cobblestones are still there, under the asphalt on Baldwin Avenue, under the dirt that covers Graffiti Highway, under the grass that is growing over the graded roads of California City. The evidence is beneath the surface. It has been there the whole time, and it will outlast everything we have laid on top of it. The Failed City, An Autopsy of Urban Collapse is available now from David Bowles Books at bowlesbooks.com and wherever books are sold. For the Human Meme Podcast, I'm David Bowles, wishing you a successful evening and an unburied tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Be a human meme.